Yoga is
Stillness. Yoga is
self-awareness. Yoga is
time-tested. Yoga is
unity. Yoga is
secular. Yoga is
evolution. Yoga is
a never-ending practice. Yoga is
finite meeting infinity. This is Yoga Scussion.
All right, Gina. Well, we've got an interesting guest on Yoga Scussion today. We've got Donovan McGrath from Amplified Yoga on the show. And I think this is going to be a very interesting discussion about yoga's evolution, but also how modern versions of yoga can still be connected to traditional roots.
Yeah, I'm very excited to chat with Donovan today.
Yeah. And so let's go ahead and let him on.
Hello.
Hello, Donovan.
Hey. Nice to see you guys.
Thanks for having a yoga discussion with us. We've been looking forward to this one.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Happy to be here with you guys.
Yeah, it's funny. We got a referral to you, Donovan, from a mutual friend of yours and mine, another lover of music. And
Yes.
I think that's like an interesting segue, right, to like amplified yoga. But Gina and myself, and I'm sure listeners would be really curious. You know, we've read about you, but we'd be really curious to understand the beginning of your yoga journey and how you actually came to amplified yoga, what that process looked like, because it seems like something that was somewhat of a calling. So could you maybe speak to that?
Sure. Great to be here with you guys. Thanks for having me. And I love our mutual friend, Paul, who is definitely a music lover. I'm always amazed seeing him. He's at like every concert that's happening everywhere. So he's definitely a lover of it. And we've had great amplified experiences together too. So great to be with you guys. Well, yeah, my yoga journey started in New York City when I was 19 years old. I was training as an actor at the time, and my acting teacher told me that I had a lot of energy, and it would be really great if I could learn how to harness it and utilize it. And somebody in my class just happened to be there right next to me when she said that, and he was like, "Well, I went to a Kundalini Yoga class yesterday. Never heard this word in my life." And he said, we were chanting, we were moving, we were breathing, we were crying, we were laughing. And of course, like I lit right up because all you want to do as a young actor is like feel and emote and, you know, have these experiences where you can just throw your guts out on the stage. And so I was like, sign me up, let's go. And I went the next day to HB Studio in New York City and took my first Kundalini class. And it was for real the moment that lit the passion of my fire that still burns today. It completely changed my life. I had never done anything like that, experienced anything like that. I've been in my body in that way, although I was, you know, athletic and fit, you know, but I had never just like worked with my breath and with my concentration, moved my body in these particular positions. And I believe in that first day, I had a minor Kundalini awakening. And I walked out onto the streets in New York City, and everything around me just looked different. It looked more vibrant, more beautiful. I was more grounded in my body. I was in a state of bliss and high energy. And that's what started me on my journey. And luckily I was in a space where the yoga scene was just burgeoning in New York, you know, so Jivamukti was there and, you know, so many places were just popping up and incredible teachers were coming. So I had like, you know, a huge opportunity to learn. And I did. I just became obsessed with no idea that it would become the thing that I would ultimately put all of my or most of my attention to in terms of my work. At the time, it was just to increase my ability as an artist and to be in my body and just to react more truthfully on stage and things of that nature. But so many things about the theater and acting and empathy and energy and we're going hand in hand with the yoga and the Kundalini especially. So it wasn't long after that I did my first yoga teacher training at Shivananda, and well, the rest is history.
Well, and that's such a fascinating connection, right? Because, you know, on the surface, there might be people or listeners who look at amplified yoga and then maybe they'll have thoughts like, well, this is not traditional yoga. But you started from these like traditional lineage-based yoga systems, right? So like, how does one get from there to amplified yoga?
Well, it was just an opportunity that came. I had no idea that this was going to come through. Amplified Yoga came many years later. This was around 2018, 2019 at Wanderlust, which, Wanderlust, they created some of the biggest yoga festivals in the world that were also incorporating music. And many teachers that I'm sure a lot of your listeners know went through the Wanderlust, festivals and taught there, etc. And so I was teaching at their studio in Hollywood, and somebody called me from there and said, "Would you like to teach a deep house yoga class?" And I said, "Okay, sure." A DJ brought this idea. We'll do some yoga. Let's be clear, asana, vinyasa is what the expectation was. Choose some house music. And so that was a Sunday at 6 p.m. at the beautiful stage at Wanderlust. And I think I did some semblance of a sun salutation as the music was going, and something just really opened up in me. And I just started speaking. I said, "Get up," and had people start moving their body in a different way. And I started asking them questions about their psyche, their energy, their heart, to imagine things that they wanted to create, manifestation, things along these lines, liberating their body from just things that are held in there. As we know, the body keeps score, and to release and liberate themselves from long held beliefs and physical restrictions in their body. And the hour and a half passed and ended, and people were kind of in shock and so moved. And some people came up afterwards, literally in tears, because it can be a very emotional, cathartic experience. And they're like, "What did we just do? What just happened?" And I was like, "I'm not quite sure. Come back next Sunday. Let's see where this goes."
Yeah.
And, right after that, I just started doing it every Sunday. The classes were packed. Within a year, I was headlining all the Wanderlust festivals. I went even more deeply. I just started what I felt receiving information about what the next steps were. It was just so organic, and one of them was to go deeper into my Kundalini training. Although I had been practicing Kundalini for 25 years at that point, I just wanted to go deeper. So I went to Yoga West, and I met with a man named Guru Singh, who's still an incredible teacher and somebody who really inspires me. And I just went into another teacher training for Kundalini at the same time as this was all evolving, and just went very, very deep into that practice, because it became clear that it was not going to be a vinyasa yoga experience. And Kundalini really speaks to me. And then there's so much more that I bring to it other than the traditional Kundalini teachings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Wow.
I love that you said that a lot of people might look at this and say this isn't traditional yoga. And I definitely do get those comments. And because very traditional Kundalini was taught at Wanderlust, and some people were like, "Well, that's not yoga, that's not Kundalini." And I beg to differ. I think a lot of people actually have a big misconception about what yoga is, and they think it is the asana, they think it is the vinyasa or the Ashtanga series by Patabi Joyce, which was invented in the 19th, 20th century, and for young boys, for athleticism and things of that nature, and that's what people think are yoga. But what we're doing in that space in Amplified definitely is using many, many aspects of the yoga practice and philosophy. So it might not be what people consider traditional, but it certainly is using the yogic principles and technologies. No doubt about that.
Yeah, since we've gone there, right? Like anyone who's been in the yoga space, I think for a decade plus, you've probably been on both the receiving end of this issue, maybe, or the giving end, or you've had your own thoughts about what constitutes traditional or real yoga, right? While still, if you stay in the space, if you continue to learn, you understand that yoga itself has been evolving for a long time,
Yes.
right? And so I think it's really interesting how the human propensity for tribalism maybe still manifests even within a yoga context, right? So yeah, that's just my immediate thought. But yeah, Gina, I'm sure you've got a question.
Well, yeah. And when you were describing, being in acting classes and like doing all of this, what struck me was that like, interesting, what a very Bhakti-esque kind of practice already. So it's almost like you were already doing yoga in a certain way, like the bhava of yoga or the vibe of what yoga is was already like in you, in your heart, in your practice with acting and wanting to feel and be in that like very embodied state, so it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense how you got here.
It makes perfect sense. And I'm so grateful. And really, like, as I have had a few years, as Amplified Yoga has grown and I've traveled around the world with it, I've done this in front of an audience of 10,000 people, I really can start to look back on my life story and just see like everything aligned so perfectly to bring me to that moment where something's organically just poured out. Like there was no intention of like, let me sit down and create a new niche in yoga and it's going to be called this and I'm going to trademark that. And like, it just wasn't like that. It just, the thing happened as a result of the culmination of my life experiences in yoga and just being a human being that opened up that portal that allowed amplified yoga to be born. And so, yeah, it's all so intertwined and connected. And I just feel that I'm doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing and the way I'm supposed to be doing it. And by the way, like yoga, it's always evolving.
Well, I was going to ask you, you said you do these big festivals. I was wondering, one of my questions was like, can you talk about the power of these festivals? I myself have not been to one. I've wanted to go, just haven't had the opportunity or the finances sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
But I've had friends who go and they come back and they're like, dude, I got blown away. I got disintegrated and reintegrated and unintegrated and reintegrated. And like, I know that these gatherings are like very powerful. And like, first question is, can you talk about that a little bit? But then second question is, how do you as a being, an embodied person in the world who's Donovan, right? How do you hold space for that many people and that much energy, right? Like that's such big
Yeah,
energy.
it's tremendous energy and I'm absolutely in love with it. Luckily. I love that transfer of energy because it's going between me and them and me, and then the higher source that I believe is really channeling through. So the first thing you mentioned was just like these gatherings and music festivals. I think it brings a lot of people together that are wanting community, that want to gather in a place of happiness, joy, freedom, music, connection. So there's already something that's there. You know, music brings people together and you
Yeah.
can feel it, you know, when you see an amazing artist on stage and the rhythm is there and people are moving together and there's just like, you'll make eye contact with somebody and there's a big smile. And for the most part, I feel that's the energy that's happening there. It's just like very communal, very uplifted. People, like you said, there's a financial, you know, you have to participate financially. You have to participate with your energy, setting up and getting yourself to the space, etc. People really do that because they love to be there in those spaces. So there's already like a really high vibration that's happening. So some of the ways I kind of communicate when people say, what is amplified yoga? I say, well, it's music festival energy with ancient yogic technology and the fusion of that together. And when it comes together, it's very powerful because you can take all that energy that people are feeling already and direct it and make it very intentional. And that's the power. That's the power in those spaces, you know, and people are just sort of wide open for it. And Wanderlust was also like, you know, at the forefront of kind of bringing wellness into those spaces. And now it's ubiquitous, right? Like every festival that has music generally has a yoga shala, something that they're offering. It's just luckily that kind of, you know, fusion is just growing and growing in the world. So, and handling the energy.
Yeah, you're like a finite being, you know? Like
it's
like
amazing.
I'm imagining like how much can my body vibrate, you know?
If I was betting money, I think Donovan's an extrovert too, maybe.
Yes, I am. Although I just heard recently there's another term of a person that is extroverted but also needs their time to
Ambivert.
kind of in between. Yes.
Ambrovert. Yeah, most people I have read are
yeah.
ambiverts. It's a spectrum like all sorts of things, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I definitely, you know, I'm quiet. I met and like everything in my life isn't like amplified. Even the amplified, you know, sessions aren't like starting at 100 miles per hour from beginning to end. There's a journey, there's quiet, there's introspection, there's meditation. I teach meditation without music, you know, so I like my quiet time too. But I definitely love the energy of a crowd, especially when it's coming together in such a like powerful way. And luckily, I've been granted a gift that people trust me and people go on this journey, you know?
Yeah, it's powerfully human, right? Like I'm thinking about, you know, very ancient collections of people dancing around a fire to drums, right? Just the drum beat of the universal consciousness. Like this seems like a modern manifestation of that, right? Like, and so could you maybe speak a little bit to what is it about the combination of electronic music, perhaps, and also the time that we are in now in terms of and place we're in now, where amplified yoga tends to be, although you've gone around the world, like what is it about in the West in this time that is like the perfect storm, if you will, for this kind of yoga?
Well, I think people just want something that's very engaging. Music creates a reaction in the body right away. It just immediately hits you. You hear a tone, you hear a sound, and usually the electronic music that my DJs are playing or I'm using, it just hits you in a way that's like automatically uplifting. So you're engaged, and the rhythm and the energy. I mean, this is all being backed scientifically now, what music does. I mean, there's studies that are coming out now that say like listening to music at BPMs of like 125 to 130 reduces or expands your life by 6 years, and like that it has very many beneficial effects on your psychology, on the physiology. And then, to make it intentional, like to really take all that energy and put it into something that people want and need and desire. They might not even know. I've had people show up to my classes at Burning Man or at festivals. They didn't even know they had to be there. They don't know anything about yoga, but they have a deep yogic experience, And I just think people are open, to something that's a little more upbeat, that seems fun. I think fun is a great element of it. It looks very celebratory and it can be just really fun. I like to tap into natural ecstasy. It doesn't mean that it's not deep and therapeutic as well. But I think if you kind of hook people in with like a good time, it's helpful. Like people just want to go. They're in these spaces. They want to dance. They want to hear music. And then to do something that is actually taking it, amplifying what's already happening, making it more powerful and potent through technology, through where we're putting our attention, how we're moving our body. It's just something that I feel people can just really relate to, tap into right away, Yeah, so I guess it was a moment in time that people did desire this kind of thing because it took off so fast. And even
we
since
need joy
2018.
yeah. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, please.
Yeah, we just need joy in our lives, I mean, like we're constantly dominated by these 24-hour news cycles and all of this horrible stuff. And I'm not saying that we should look away from the terrible things that are happening and not be present, but like it's sometimes it's really hard to like wake up and be like, where's my joy coming from today? Like how am I accessing human joy? Because I'm not just a machine that can be aware of all of these things. Like I have to live in this interface of like emotions and physical body. And I love that you're just like, it's fun.
Yeah.
And also there's this thing comes up for me because I love Kundalini Yoga as well.
Beautiful.
And when you bring someone to a Kundalini class who's never been there before, I think you get one of two reactions. It's like, I freaking love this. Or it's like, why are we flopping like a fish on the floor with our, like, why are we doing these weird things?
Yeah.
And they either get super freaked out by it. And I think if you give Kundalini Yoga a chance, like sometimes people's first reaction is like, I don't like this. It's really weird. But I have found some of the most intense, energetic sensations in my body through Kundalini. Like, it's so powerful. And you're making it more accessible to folks. And they don't necessarily have to understand what that means intellectually, lineagely, like any of those lees, right? They can just come and benefit. Beautiful.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And that's actually something I say in my sessions all the time. I do them virtually and in person and say, you don't have to understand what's happening intellectually. And a lot of people want to. They want to understand what's happening, why exactly we're doing it, what a sound they might make, moving the body somatically that lets out energy, that is a discharge of energy. That might be something that's been deeply held, a scream. You know what I mean? Of just like trying to keep shit together. And then, for a moment, you can just let yourself go and scream it out. They don't even understand. They don't have to understand and put words to like what that is that they just let go of exactly. It's just an energetic discharge and it has profound effects on the body, And so, and to speak to what you said about Kundalini, I know a lot of people just look at it and they're like, that's a cult. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's misguided, or maybe in some ways it has been with certain people in certain positions of power. Who knows? But, that's to be debated and not somewhere I necessarily want to go. But, people look at it, or just yoga in general. I mean, how many times have you heard, well, I'm not flexible, or I'm boring, or, things along that line. And so they're completely closed off.
Still.
Yeah, I can't sit still. I can't still my mind. We've heard it a million times, right? And so somebody might look at Kundalini and just be like, oh, hell no, there's just no way I'm going to go into that space. So creating a space where I'm using that technology, but doing it in a way, I always say it's a little, not sneaky in a bad way, but stealth. It's like people just kind of come in and they're like, oh, you start music and the music's going. This feels good. I get them to connect with people around them. Oh, you're connected to other human beings just like you, And it just starts to be fun. Then it's like, let's get in there. Let's get into your heart. Let's get into like what you really are, that you're a creator. Like really to realize that, and to really embody that and feel that. Some people have forgotten. Some people
For
have never
sure.
even been liberated in their body. First, it hits people differently how they need to be touched. But like some people literally have never been out of their head and they're able to let their body just be free in movement, which I think was
Mm.
actually my first yogic experience before I went to my first yoga class at a teen dance club in Dallas, Texas, on the dance floor. Just in
Yeah,
a moment
music
of bliss and light and freedom, you know?
Yeah, music has that power. I was going through your website and I went to the page where it shows the DJs that you work with and the music creators. Oh my gosh, I was blown away. I was like, Spotify, follow, follow, follow. The music was great. I was just like, I get this.
I can't wait to have you. I can't wait to have you guys in the space.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we'll
Yeah.
try to
Yeah.
make it happen at some point in time. So like I've been thinking, in this discussion, I mean, whether it's the Kundalini seeming a little cult-like and also acknowledging that we're in the West, right? So, in traditional frameworks, Kundalini is kind of referred to as the rise of the serpent's energy, right? And in the West, the Abrahamic faiths, have a hold, especially Christianity. So the concept of serpent comes with baggage, right?
Sure.
Or can come with baggage, right? So
Yeah.
when we're thinking about approaching a Western audience, if we were essentially saying, okay, we're going to raise our serpent energy, even there may make people a little like uncomfortable, right? So
Right.
do either of you have like some thoughts along these lines?
Gina, do you want to go or?
I mean, boy, I could riff on this. I mean, I have a couple of thoughts, which, yoga always gets misconstrued as being, or maybe construed as being a religion. I mean, it does come from a cultural tradition that is also a religion. And so I think a lot of people, I mean, I remember in my teacher training, there were folks in there who like had to tell us they were Christians and that this was their defining belief system and that yoga was to them not religious. And it's like, I think yoga can be whatever you want it to be personally. But also I was thinking too, when we were talking about people finding these spaces and coming together in sort of tribalism, I was thinking also like, oh, we've been disconnected from our natal cultures through colonialism and through religiosity and like this kind of these ideas of, like we've gone into these faith traditions. And I'm talking about like people who are coming from Europe, right? Like white people who are coming from Europe. Like we're disconnected from our cultural traditions pre-Roman, right? Like Celts, Picts, Anglo-Saxons, Norwegian folks who were Scandinavian in nature, Finnish, Serbo-Slavic, whatever, like all of these different. So we're disconnected. I'm an archaeologist in my other life.
Amazing.
And so I read all of these things. Like I just read, I want to grab this book. I just read this book called Proto, and it's about the evolution of Indo-European, which is the root language of a large percentage of modern languages, where they were talking about the religious traditions. And also Sanskrit is part of that language tradition. Like if you go back far enough in time, Proto-Indo-European is the mother language of Sanskrit, English, Germanic, Icelandic. It's really interesting. And so when you were talking about finding your place in these spaces that feel sort of tribal and collective, I was thinking, oh yeah, because we've been divorced from our deep roots, And I think that's why yoga resonates with so many people so deeply and so like in such a like spirit way, is because it gives us access to a spirituality that isn't based in, or that maybe for the Western. I don't know about in the East. I can't speak for people who are practicing yoga in the East, because I think that is very much intertwined with Hinduism and other religions like Buddhism. But I think for people in the West where yoga's been kind of changed is that it gives us an accepting place or space to enter into a relationship with our own spirit. Hope that's not being too woo-woo. But I do
I don't think so
that.
at all.
Yeah.
No, it's not woo-woo, and it's actually you have a lot of knowledge about history and language and where these things came from and old rituals and things like that, and your archaeology. I find that so fascinating. I think that's one of the reasons I got into yoga. I remember asking my mom, like, about God and about heaven and like, how do I go to heaven? And like, I get the best advice, which is like, just be a good boy, be a good person, you're going to go to heaven, which left a lot of room for me to discover things, right? And that's
Yeah.
kind of my religious upbringing. And I also, and then I was living in Texas at one point in my life. I was a military kid and moved around. And of course, a lot of people were in church and they were Baptists, they were Nazarenes, they were, I'm supposedly Episcopalian. That's what I'm, my dad is. And things of that nature. And I was curious. I think I was actually longing, like as a young man, as a young teenager, I was like, what is this? I wanted a relationship with something bigger. I felt something. I remember hearing like, well, what is God? Where is God? Well, God's all around you. God's in everything. I just remember hearing these types of things as a kid. And then when I went to explore in different, churches and stuff, the things I was hearing was not aligning with me. I found it very controlling. I found it, homophobic. There's a lot of that I was hearing, and like that, I just never believed that there was some God that was judging, and that I had to I was born in sin, and I was this terrible person, and I had to be fearful of this God, and things of that nature. It just never resonated with me. But I wanted something, I think, that connected me with spirit, the source, with like something bigger than myself, and that's something, we said earlier, you don't have to understand it intellectually, but I believe that day in my first Kundalini experience, that happened. And I felt like a deep spiritual experience, and so I think that yoga, and I don't shy away from that in my spaces. I invite people to have the experience that they're ready for. I'm not pushing anything. Everything is a suggestion, that they can connect to the higher power. They can call it the universe, the source. In the Kundalini tradition, God just means generator, organizer, destroyer. So I will say that to some people sometimes. So if in a Kriya the word God is used, it can just be, sort of formulated that way that's more digestible for people. Also, I had, in terms of people saying, oh, I'm Christian, I can't, this is my religion, this, and so practicing yoga is not in alignment with that, and I respect that. Like, I'm not pushing anything on anyone. I was just down in Tulum teaching, and I ran into a guy like on a, transportation thing, getting me to where I was going to teach yoga. We started talking. I was like, yeah, I'm about to teach. He's like, oh, well, I'm a Christian. I can't do that. I was like, okay, that's cool. It's great because I invited him, but then he started talking about what he does in Christianity, which was prayer and connection to God, his God. And then, and then God will just tell him what's next. Do this, do that. Like he was supposed to be in Tulum to meet some, and so he believed that he's having this conversation with what he calls his God through a Christian lens. And I was like, well, I do the same thing. I just don't necessarily consider myself a Christian, but I said in meditation and yoga, I was like, I'm listening. There's something bigger. I might look at it in a different way, but I think we're looking and hearing from the same thing, And he was really on board with that and just thought that was super cool. And so, I don't push it on anybody. I really respect people's beliefs and where they are and meet people where they're at. But I do believe it's a deep opportunity to have a spiritual connection if somebody's not in a formal religion that feels meaningful and helpful in this life.
This. Yeah, I love this. And I hope that there's more of these conversations, happening if people can be open to them, because I do think that a lot of people would find a lot of commonality and kindredship, if they were willing to open themselves to these conversations. But, there's been kind of like this Kundalini thread with you, Donovan, going back to your early yoga experiences. And I just want to pull on that thread a little bit.
Sure.
What do you think it is about conscious work with Kundalini energy that could really help someone in these times who's maybe feeling overwhelmed by events of 2025 and 2026?
I believe that when you tap into this energy, which we all have, it's believed that it's latent in most people, but it's there and available. And that's what Kundalini Yoga is working through different Kriyas to sort of tap into this energy, move it through the chakra system, through the Sushmana, and to connect with the infinite. Let's remember what yoga is. It's connecting the finite, this body, this identity with the infinite. People might call that God. They might call it source. And I believe you can have an experience of that. And I think when you do, it just changes your perspective entirely. It's like there's a lot of things going on in this world. There's so much we can barely register it or handle it, which I think is happening. And that's a little bit of a diversion of the conversation. People need tools, I think, in this time to just keep themselves healthy. sound and body, mind, and spirit, which is what health is, because we're being inundated with so much information. Our nervous systems aren't accustomed to carrying this around and looking like this and having it beaming at us and telling us all sorts of terrible things and wonderful things, depending where you want to go. But I think there are a lot of forces at work through this to really distract you, to diminish your energy, to numb you down, to check you out. And, I think in Kundalini Yoga, you start to have an experience of this connection. And it just changes your perspective and it makes you a little less stressed out. You believe that there are other systems at work. There's a bigger picture at play. And, you can really tap into, through the power of Kundalini, where you're putting your attention. I always say, with people in my practice, we're very verbal. We use our voices. I say things, the mantras in Gurmukhi and Sanskrit and also in English. And just, what we're choosing to see, beauty around us. There's beauty around us. There's always beauty around us, right? There's terrible things and horrible things happening simultaneously. But where are we putting our attention? And so just to remind people that they are masterful in what they're allowing into their system and how they're choosing to react to it. And so I think these things become amplified when you start practicing Kundalini Yoga and it comes through you. As an example, it's believed as it starts to penetrate through the chakra system and reaches the heart, and penetrates through the bottom of the fourth chakra, there's a feeling of expansiveness, love, harmony, and unity. So if you're in that energy and vibration, you're perceiving the world differently, right? You're emanating something differently. You're perceiving the world differently because that is available to us all the time. There's always love. There's always kindness. There's always compassion. And so, but you feel it. It's not just a thought. It's not something that's intellectualized. It's an experience. And so you're walking around with a greater sense of connection to the bigger picture, to source. You see beauty, that you're divine just by feeling the magnificence of your body and the pulse within you. And you just start to live in a space that's more in love with life, in love with people, in love with your own creativity, with art, and all of these things. So we need that right now because a lot of people are crumbling under the pressures of these times. It gives you the capacity to endure the pressures of these times, and it's essential.
I really appreciate that. Yeah. If I could 100% your face right now, I would.
Yeah.
Yeah. I just think that just so powerful what you said. And as you were saying all of this, I was thinking some of Western culture, a lot of Western culture, honestly, tries to keep us from feeling. And I think that's what all this, social media and all of this stuff, it keeps us in these anxiety feelings and less in the feeling of unity that we can be as humans, right? As humans of any race, any gender, any culture, we are humans together. And I think one thing I love so much, sorry, I have a lot of thoughts in my head, but one thing I love so much about Kundalini is that it's rooted in this really rich tradition of Tantra, right? And so there's a couple of ways that yoga goes, where one of the ways is liberation from the body through purification and through this kind of dharma or karmic system where it's we continually reincarnate and kind of purify the system so we can get out of the system. And then Tantra, which I feel is so rich, is get in the system. Tantra's get in the body, feel the feelings, be overwhelmed by grief and joy and ecstasy and anger and all of the things. This is the experience of yoga, is having a body. And I'm a Western person. I grew up in a Western context. I grew up in a fundamental Christian ideology that I don't identify with as myself. But I grew up in that framework. And so I think the kind of message we often get from our Western societies and Western world religions is that the body is a problem. There's this problem to be solved in the body. And what I love about Kundalini and Tantra is it's no, the body is the gift. The body is the glove, right? The body is the mechanism for interaction with divinity, because you can't, if you're disembodied, you're just divinity floating. But if you're embodied, you're feeling divinity. You're coming up against divinity. You're meeting divinity in the people that you're connecting with. You're meeting divinity in the animals, in the plants, in the soil, in the rocks. Divinity is a lived experience.
Yes.
Sorry, that's a lot, but I'm loving this conversation.
You're not only meeting it, you are it. You are
You
it.
are
You
it.
are
Yeah, you're
divine. And
transmitting
I
it.
always use the body as just a reference, to like really try to get people to get very sensitive to what's happening there, and how miraculous it is. As an example, one thing I do, sometimes it comes up, there's a rhythm going. I'm just having people like tap their femur bones to the beat, and reminding them that they're in a state of creation. And that every time they're tapping their thighs to the rhythm, 2 million new red blood cells are forming. I mean, to me,
Mhm.
that's like miraculous and so fascinating. Most people aren't even thinking about this, but there is a force that still we don't know. We don't know what it is. We don't know where consciousness comes from. We don't know where life comes from. We don't know what's beating our heart. We have so much knowledge in science, and there's so much we don't know. So something is at work. I have people just recognize, okay, that's forming. Your kidneys just filtered a liter of blood. You're not thinking about it. You're not working at it. It's just happening. There's a divine intelligence right here that if you
Mhm.
just contemplate it for a second and drop into your body and just feel it, it's like, whoa, I am divine.
Yeah, so on Radiolab, they had this episode about they were interviewing this scientist who was like trying to figure out how do cells do what they do. And she was able to see that it's through light transmission. We are
Mhm.
literally creating and destroying ourselves with light. Like she was able to see that like cells, mitochondria, are emitting light. They're emitting light
Yes.
frequencies. And so, like there are these scientists, men and women who are studying consciousness. And one of the papers that came out that I read this book called Consciousness. I can't remember who wrote it, but it was so good. They
Good
reference
title.
this. I know, right?
Yeah.
I think it's called Conscious, actually. It's called Conscious. They reference this
Mhm.
scientific study that's happening on consciousness where physicists are actually thinking now that like consciousness is happening on a cellular level, which blows my mind because if you think about yourself on a cellular level, not only do you contain your own cells, but you contain the cells of like microbiota inside your body. You
Mhm.
contain the cells of viruses. You contain the cells of other weird things in your body that are not necessarily you, that have their own, that can be separate from you, like bacteria, parasites, like you name it. This stuff is in our body.
Yeah.
We're not impermeable. So consciousness is actually co-creation.
Yes. I love that.
It's
Yes.
insane. But it's
It's
also
mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing and
yes.
heart-opening. It's awe-inspiring. It's awe-inspiring, which is a state I love to be in and love to help people come into. And you don't need to be standing at the edge of the Grand Canyon, which is beautiful, or like a gorgeous sunset or whatever, and all of that's available, and take it in and love it and feel it and like look at the glory, the divinity around us. But yeah, it's like also right here. Like if you just start to contemplate the things you're saying and these scientists that are like,
Yeah.
oh, where's this coming from? And what we're being able to see and what we're learning. I mean, it's just in the past couple decades that we became aware of the microbiome, and that it's actually like, we're sort of like, that's actually moving us and that's speaking to our brain, and all of these things are happening like people just weren't even aware. It's a new thing that has just come into our reality, right? Like the importance of the microbiome and all the chemical conversations that are happening from that. It's
Mhm.
just, for me, like it's awe inspiring, and it's like then just through your physical body and just touching it and realizing it, like for me it takes me to a moment of like realization, like I am divine. And it is yoga,
Yes.
it's union, there's no separation. And this is, and I love, there's so many great things we're talking about. I lean more towards the tantric, I don't want to be a renunciate. I don't want to go live in a cave, I don't want to like shut myself off. I'd like times of that for a different perspective, but like I love sensual things, I love taste, I like sex, I like food, like all of these
Yeah.
things that are just like, I love the warmth of the air on my skin. I like relationships with people and music and things that take me on a journey. And so I'm definitely like on that path of like, no, if we have this body, it's like how wonderful, what a gift to be able to touch, feel, love, taste, and do all of these things. So, and even in that, like and a bite of just delicious food that's been prepared with love, there's so much goodness in that. There's
Mhm.
so much
Yeah.
divinity in that,
Well, and I've noticed like in this conversation, we're making references to divine energy, light, and love. And when you dive into theology, and the various religions, you really start to see that these concepts, these words are really being used as synonyms, right? Like even in the translations, like these were the words, that existed as it was translated through time. So in my mind, when people talk about God or they talk about divine or light or love, for me, it's all just the same thing, right?
Mhm.
And just yoga, whether it's an amplified yoga session or meditating in the Himalayas or on a cushion, in your apartment in New York City. Like all of those are opportunities to connect to your preferred synonym, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I have these discussions with a very good friend of mine, and she's Christian, and sometimes I feel like she's trying to get me to see things from her perspective, which I lived in that perspective for a long time as a child. I was forced to. And I always tell her, I'm like, they all lead to the same place. And what I think
Right.
world religions, all of them, is there's a seeking, there's a yearning, there's a drive, but it's more of a yearning, I think. It's like a deep longing to return to divinity, to return to a sense that we are long lived, that we're eternal,
Yes.
and that we can engage with something that feels massively larger than ourselves. Like, such an interesting concept for a mind to create the idea of a god. But I also think that in the natural world, when as our ancestors were integrating, we were embedded in the natural world in ways that we are not today, that we recognized that big, infinite. We didn't have words for it. We had to make up these words, right? And I think there's still that longing in humans. Like, we long for this connection to divinity, however that manifests itself, right? And it's going to manifest differently.
Yes.
If you're born in a certain country, you will just have these types of religions to be, And so
Right.
I think it's a universal experience, right? This longing for divinity, and it can take shape in so many different ways, but it's like all the paths get there,
Yeah, there are many different paths, and yeah, and they're valuable for certain people, and some people, like you said, don't have a choice. You said that you used the word forced. You were sort of forced into this way of belief, and that this was embedded into you, and this is what you were told was happening. And I don't know exactly what it was, but I do know friends that were like, "This is heaven, this is hell. If you do this, you're going to go to hell, and this is going to happen. Or if you have not accepted Jesus into your life, then you're going to go to hell." I mean, it never made sense to me. I remember being like 13 and being like, "Yeah, but what about all the people in the world that just never had exposure to Jesus? All of a sudden they're going to
Right.
hell. They came on this planet and they didn't have that exposure, so they're just I just never believed in a God that wasn't benevolent and loving, and yeah, but yeah, the longing is clearly there. I mean, it's all philosophy, right? Like, people are just, why do we exist? Why are we here? What's our purpose? And
Mhm.
what's going on? What happens when we die? you know
Right.
I tend to believe, and I don't say anything with a surety, you know what I mean, because I always leave space open. I'm never going to come and say this is the way it is and this is what happens when
Yeah.
you die, and if you do this and you're going to go to this next karmic level, or there is reincarnation. This It's all open. I'm open to all possibilities. I tend to believe that when you die, you have the experience that we were just speaking of, and you're just reminded, like, we wake up like this is a dream almost, and we wake
Yeah.
up when we leave this body, and then we were reminded of what we can potentially experience through the practice of yoga here in the human form, but then
Mhm.
we were reminded, like, oh, there's no separation there. We are all source. We are all part of this one thing. And then we take on little sort of identities in these human forms. But you wake up in the dream and remember what you're in, and what you really are. And it's not just this flesh and this body, or this name Donovan, or the number that is my social security and all that kind of stuff. We are more than that, and we realize
Yeah.
that we have that experience when we die. That's my personal belief, but I believe we can also. I mean, that's one of the things that happens when you, through the yoga practice, through the kleshas, through the things that are believed to not be true, which is fear of death, that we are infinite, that we don't really die. The fear of death is removed in a yogi,
Mhm.
ultimately,
Mm.
right? I mean, that's a big thing.
Mm.
Yeah.
If we're
No,
confronted with that, we're
it's a
dealing with it.
huge thing. And like I think it's tied to this idea we've touched on a little bit, like this idea of returning to source, right? And like how once you've returned, you've connected to it, that also maybe tempers that fear of death, right? Because you start to see even the concepts of birth and death as just that, concepts, right? And it
Right.
just your life, this gift of this life in this body is essentially within like a tapestry of like energy transfer, right? And so,
Right.
I'm curious, Donovan, right? There's the allure of music, there's the allure of the drum beat, the bass of electronic music that has this powerful pull. But if you'll maybe talk to Gene and I, you've alluded to these quiet moments, even in an amplified yoga session, right? And so could you maybe talk to us a little bit about where those have happened, or even like the power of those quiet moments, even during an amplified yoga session?
Sure. There are many, but oftentimes towards the end, we've gone through a long journey. People have released tension, pressure, and stress from their body. They've been reminded of who they are, how powerful they are, how masterful they can be, that they're creators, and that we are vibration and energy. And there are things that we can tap into. And so oftentimes the heart's wide open. I mean, there are kriyas that we can do in Kundalini that really specifically work for the heart. All of these things are being, measured scientifically now, that it's magnetic energy and we can open it. People have been in love before, when the heart chakra is wide open, you're in love. It's like, let's go. Things are great. Somebody breaks your heart and you can barely get out of bed. Like, this is the fluctuation of the energy of the heart. And so sometimes, we'll go to a peak and then it gets a little bit quiet, and I'll just have people think of somebody and tell them that they don't have to be on this earth. They don't have to be in their body, but somebody that they want to connect to with this energy of an open heart and love. And right away, I mean, you could see it. People, they come to those people, and then, that they have an impression on you. They've made an impression. They live with you. They are part of you. And I have people really sense that, and I have them see their eyes, see their face, and then I just have them say the words, "I love you," and see their reaction. This is a time where people get very emotional because they feel very connected to that person, even though they may have left their body. And then they feel that it's given and taken. That's something I help people to do, is like, can you really give and receive love? People can give love, but if you give love to them, they can barely take it sometimes, or some people just take and don't give, but they feel this connection to this person, to this energy of just pure love. And it brings up incredible emotion. So usually we've had all this noise, we've had all this movement, in the music, and then it's silent, and then or something that's instrumental. Still, it could be like even a tone that's like really beautiful that just gets you right into the heart space. So things of that nature, just having them connect. Also, I just sometimes have people, if they believe it, and I always say that this is something you can believe or not believe, but let's imagine if there's a council, if there are energies, if there are entities, let's call them in, the ones that support you, love you, and want the absolute best for you. Some people believe in these types of things. They believe they can tap into their ancestors. They believe that they have angels. I mean, angels might exist, they might not. I can't say that for sure. You know what I mean? I know that I've had experiences that made me believe that there's something protecting me. Some people believe that, maybe in Christianity, like, oh, there are angels. There's no doubt about that. But, believe it or not, people can tap into the energy that supports them and loves them. Their ancestors, their grandparents, somebody who's passed away already, and they feel it. And then I have them like put their arms up and just feel light and lifted, like the wind's behind their sails, and just remember that they can tap into that like that. They can remember. And that's a very powerful tool, because the world can get a little lonely, and it can get a little frightening, and people live in anxiety because their future is uncertain. All of ours is. Some people feel they get more of a grasp on it. They got their finances worked out, and then something, comes. But, so when life gets like that, I think you can tap into, like, there's an energy and there's a support team around you. And that can be very powerful and very just comforting, So there's moments like that. I also have people connect with each other sometimes. So maybe after, we connect with each other. One thing I have people do is, rub their hands together and say the words healing hands, healing hands. Do you believe you have them? Most people will be like, yeah, I have them. Okay, amplify your healing hands. You have the energy. First, we give love to ourselves during the practice. And I really believe this is important. Just to start with yourself from love, kindness, and compassion. To hold yourself. I literally will have people hold themselves and say, I love myself. And I know that could really come across as cringe and kind of cheesy. But actually, it's one of the most powerful things that people do. Like when it's done sincerely. And I'm connected and I'm teaching from the heart. And so that's why people trust me, and they will actually do that. And I've had grown men fall to their knees bawling because they've never actually even conceived of holding themselves with such tenderness, love, and care.
Yeah.
And so then I'll have people face each other maybe at the end of the class and, look to each other's eyes, which can be very uncomfortable for people, which is super interesting. Why is that so uncomfortable to connect with another person, and then take their healing hands, and one will have their hands down and just receive. And somebody else is giving the healing energy, and just to watch that happen between two people, people, first of all, ignite that they have that within them, which I believe all people do. Some people are more connected to that. There are healers, obviously, that can wave their hands. There's something called Kundalini activation process. Maybe you've seen it. Somebody just over them like this, and the bodies are convulsing. They're moving energy, and so I have people do that with each other, and it's really, really powerful. Just for some people to just relax and receive, and for some people to tap into their power. It's a quiet moment. One of the mantras I use in the practice is health in my body, love in my heart, peace in my mind. I am divine. And then I'll have the person that's doing the healing energy say that to that other person. Health in your body, love in your heart, peace in your mind. You are divine. It's powerful, And so there are moments like that, just like silent, powerful, potent moments where people just really feel deeply their emotions, their heart open, a connection. And so those are some of the silent moments.
Wow.
Love it, Donovan.
I'm like about
Thank
to
you.
cry listening to this. It's so beautiful and vulnerable. Like you're creating some really wonderful space for people to enter into their vulnerability in a way that that asks them to step into love instead of seeing
Yes.
vulnerability as a weakness, but rather seeing it as you deserve, right? You deserve to receive. Yeah.
You deserve
Ooh,
to
I am
receive.
tearing up. I am tearing up.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you for allowing yourself to share your heart and your emotion. And that's something I want to encourage people to do. And that's what really happens in these spaces. I told you at the beginning, people came up crying after the first session. That came out of me. I want to embrace that. We are feeling emotional, vulnerable, complicated, beautiful human beings. And you mentioned that earlier, in this conversation, embracing all of those aspects of ourselves. Everybody out there's scared at one point. Everybody out there is going to lose somebody that they love. Everybody is going to have to look at their body aging, getting old, and knowing that they're going to leave it at one point. There are global insecurities. I mean, especially right now at this time, people are very fearful, and that's okay. We need to express that and feel all of that in groups where we can feel supported and loved and seen. And that's really what I try to create.
This is taking me into a place where the thoughts I've been thinking a lot about community and how do we build and maintain communities that are supportive, that support vulnerability, that receive and give, right? I'm really good at giving. I am not so good at receiving.
Yeah.
And so I'm always trying to well, not always, just recently I'm wow, how do I receive from my community? How do I let myself be vulnerable when I'm usually the giver? And think that what you're doing is a perfect place for that, right? Because it's we can show up. I don't have to show up as Gina with all my baggage to meet a community. I can just show up as Gina, and I might be feeling some of my baggage shifting as we're doing these practices. But ultimately, it's we've entered into, or participants have entered into, this idea of vulnerability together, and that we don't necessarily have to unpack all of that baggage and look at every piece of it. But I can see that you're human, you can see that I'm human, and we can create that connection together that ultimately brings us into a unity, and divinity.
Yes. I
Ooh,
couldn't agree
this
more.
is getting me in all the good
Everybody's got
places.
something. Everybody's got something they're carrying. Everybody's coming in. If we can just sort of another thing I have people say, to each other, which is very powerful. And I think if we just operated in the world, what if we just took one practice out of this? And you're looking at each other. So I'm looking at you two right now, and we'll have them repeat after me, the words, I am you are me and you are one. And they're looking at each other. We've had this whole experience. I mean, that's a very powerful thing. You treat others the way you want to be treated. There is really, we all sort of want the same
golden
things.
rule.
We have the golden rule. Yeah. And we all have different, our own patterns and our own gifts. And we are different to some degree, of course. I mean, we're individual, but at the source, we all really want the same thing. We all want safety, that our family to be protected, love, to feel fulfilled, to feel connected. And so just if you treat the person in front of you, whoever that may be, I am you are me and you are one. It's just a very powerful space to operate from,
Yeah.
And I think it brings, the big thing I want to bring into the world is love, kindness, compassion, authenticity, creativity, and things of that nature for people to just live fulfilled and unblock themselves from their limitations that have just been impressed upon them,
Yeah.
And just to feel that they can be in a space and there is beauty and vulnerability, it's like that underneath, it's amazing what can come off that's just right under the surface. And that happens in amplified yoga very fast. The emotions
Yeah.
come right up,
Mhm, mhm.
and it's a beautiful thing. And so I really want to embrace that totality of who we are as human beings.
Yeah.
Mm.
And love is the ultimate state of vulnerability, right? It's been said. And I think my, personal hope is whether people are practicing yoga in a studio, at home, or an amplified yoga session, we're learning, and I do think this is part of the human species evolution, is learning to take these profound experiences, these profound connecting moments away from these experiences into the mundane experiences, into the grocery store aisle, into
Yeah.
the car ride when someone cuts you off, into that inflammatory comment that you, for some reason, expose yourself to online, that's triggering something inside of you. Like if
Yes.
we could take this wisdom that's ancient and true and practiced into these other arenas of our human lives and practice it there, I think that's really when our species will really start to manifest the change that I think we all want, right?
I couldn't agree more. Absolutely. And it's funny, it kind of just brings me back to what we were talking about at the beginning. Like some people might say that's not traditional yoga. And then you'll ask somebody, okay, well, what is traditional yoga? And they'll be like, well, it's a sun salutation, it's these physical postures. And I'm like, well, do you know what the yamas and niyamas are? And they don't. But they're saying what is yoga and what's not, I mean,
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
yamas and niyamas are 10 simple but powerful things. It's like
Even
if
the
you just practice it.
Vedas.
Yes.
The Vedas don't even talk about yoga, but they're the mother text for all other
Mm,
texts that come in the yoga lineage, and it's
mm,
like
Yes.
mm,
they don't even talk about yoga as we know it today.
mhm.
Yes, absolutely. Now
And I
there's
love that you
Lululemon. There's a whole thing way to dress for yoga. I mean, there's this whole thing, I mean, in the Western world, right? It's kind of, and it can be very physical, and like a lot of things can become very competitive and very ego driven and very, very attached to the body. And like, I mean, you see people doing tree pose and like falling out of it and just beating themselves up. You know what I mean? Just like,
Mm.
that's the furthest thing from ahimsa. They're like trashing themselves because they happen to fall out of tree pose. I mean, it's simple, but it's crazy how I see that kind of thing all the time. So just like the yamas and niyamas are so powerful.
Yeah.
love how you're talking about the yamas and the niyamas because this is the part like maybe for a lot of us we go to yoga just to feel better in our bodies and we don't think about the underlying principles that guide it. And then you start to learn this and you're like, oh, it's not the same as the 10 commandments, but it is in a way a set of principles that guide our behaviors and how we interact with the world. And yeah, ahimsa, I tell you what, I don't know. I will never say that I've ever mastered these precepts because for me, it's just like I come back to ahimsa all the time and it's like nonviolence. How do you practice this? Non-harming. How do you do this when like everything that we do in the world, from eating to consuming, items and buying clothes and just existing is embedded, there's harm embedded in that. And
Yes.
it's just like, but they're so good to ground into all the time because I think it keeps us honest with ourselves. Like,
Mm.
Absolutely.
I
I
don't
just
want to
think like,
perpetuate harm, towards myself
yes.
or any human or any
Mm.
being, even grass or
Mm.
rocks.
Right. Yes. Absolutely. I just think, I mean, I would just tell somebody you just do the best you can, just to be mindful of it. I mean, inherently, yes, there is harm in I love my truck. I mean, it does have an eco-fuel engine, but it's like I like the car that I drive. It's putting something into the air that is going to somebody's lungs that is harmful. The food that I eat, I try to get it local, but just being aware, like you try to do your best. I think it can also be harmful in a way if you get so rigid, you drive yourself crazy, and then you just feel
Exactly.
like you're not doing well enough, and then you feel guilty. I mean, there's harm in that too, right? Like if you're like, I'm not
Yeah.
being non-violent enough, like, but just to be aware of
Mm.
it, just to
Mm.
kind of like check back in and be like, okay, well, what can I do in this situation? You know, you talked about the car honking or whatever, like being in traffic. I mean, that's a real thing. I experience it still. I've been practicing yoga for 30 years. If somebody just throws something at me that is like unjustified, hateful, and mean, my first reaction is retaliation. Still.
For
Mhm.
sure.
but I
Yeah.
have the tools. To just be like, I can transmute the energy very quickly because of what I
Yeah.
practice and what yoga's brought to me. But that doesn't mean there's not still fire in me. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
if somebody might say something, if somebody said something racist or, homophobic in front of me, or my reaction is going to be really strong and
Yeah.
initially aggressive, probably. Like,
Sure.
how
Mhm.
I
dare
think
you,
there's
you know?
well, and I think it's like I've always kind of thought of it like we are, as humans, right? We've got this instinctual predisposition towards ape-like behavior, right? And so we have this, we want to beat our chest and we want to mash our fists. That's the immediate reaction. But the gift of yoga, the gift of a variety of different systems out there is that it helps evolve that, ape-like mentality into the ability to be like, pause, reflect, respond, don't react, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
that's what we're
Yeah.
practicing. That's what we're doing. And it's a lifelong practice. You know what I mean? I think I'm so excited for what the future brings. I really see a vision of myself being like 95, vibrant, working with people, working with young people, people of all ages, and having, 45 more years experience to offer. And, I'm still at that point. Then I'll probably be at a point where it's time to leave the body almost, who knows what's going to happen in the future. Maybe we'll live to 200, and I'll be challenged at that point too. And I'm sure there'll be something heartbreaking about leaving behind the people I love or whatever, who knows? Maybe I'll be totally enlightened by then. Could be.
Yeah.
But it's a lifelong practice and there's beauty in that. And that's just part of the human experience. But I think having this technology, these tools, this awareness is going to do so much good for the world, And I always just
Mm.
believe you start with yourself, you cultivate it within yourself, the things you want to see. That's something I also say, and a lot of at the end of my classes, I'll just say, let's say something together because we are lighthouses. We talked about light earlier. That's a mantra I have people
Mhm.
say. And
Mm.
enthusiasm when the music's going, I am a lighthouse, like to go out there with that
Yes.
energy. It's so wonderful. It's really powerful to tap into that. And that's what the world needs. So I'll have people say, may all beings everywhere be happy and free. I'll start with me.
Mm.
And that
Mm.
always just like, it's so simple. And it came to me in a class, like things do. And it's like, wow, it just like hits home to people. It's like, okay, I think most people want to see that in the world. They look at what's happening in Iran and they see what's happening in other places. I mean, there's horror shows everywhere, and I'm sure most people look at that and be like, God, can't we just be peaceful? Can't we just be happy? Why can't we all get along? Well,
Mm.
look at it inwardly too and see how you're getting along with people, how you're responding to people, how you're talking to yourself, and how can you cultivate happiness and freedom within yourself. And I think the more people we get on board with those types of things, and it's happening. I mean,
It
consciousness is
is.
changing. These
It
conversations
is.
that we can be able to talk about this, somebody's going to hear it, consciousness is rising. I think we're in a really incredible time.
Yeah. No,
We
I
are,
agree.
and we're standing up for each other, and people are showing up for their neighbors now more than they ever have, right? Like we're
Yes.
learning this. I don't know if you guys do Lee Harris, but dude, YouTube Lee Harris, he's amazing. He's got these energy
Okay.
updates for each month. And he's talking about consciousness rising. And it's even though we're seeing a lot of really intense news and all of this stuff, the other thing that I'm seeing is that there are all these people who are like, no, I reject hate. No, I reject this behavior that divides us based on our skin color, our social class, our earning ability, our religion. People are waking up to our humanity and they're showing up for each other as humans. And I just love that you say that I'll begin with me because, coming from a fundamentalist background, it's a very black and white picture. It's very like this or that. And through my years in therapy, I've learned that like that's how I learned how to think was black and white. I think
Mhm.
I think there's always been a part of me that's always been outside of that and been like, this doesn't make sense. But as you heal those kinds of traumas, I guess we can say, you start to see that it's not just black and white. It's not just one or the other. It's not just good or bad. It's like we're all in this together. We are all here together. I'm a mixture of all the things. And like, have I done things I'm not proud of? Sure, we all have. Does that mean that my heart is broken and not capable of goodness and kindness? No. It means,
Right.
like, yeah, my heart is still wonderfully capable of love and receptivity and showing up and, receiving love and all of those things. Like, There is no black or white. There is no, my brain's going, well, there are some really bad things. But it's like starting with myself. If I can stay in myself and stay centered and be peaceful and receive and give love, then all the people around me feel that, and their energy shifts. And that's how consciousness rises.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Excellent. And then the last question, Donovan, we have for you today is, if you could describe yoga in 3 words, what would they be?
Finite meeting infinity.
Oof. Profound. Love it.
Huh.
Yeah. Donovan, thank you so much. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you,
being on
guys.
Yoga
It's a wonderful
Scussion.
conversation.
Want to get early access to ad-free episodes of the entire Growing Yoga Scussion archive, as well as live recordings? Want to submit comments and questions to the guests and the hosts? You can join the Yoga Scussion Circle and receive a link to join each Yoga Scussion episode as it's recorded. During the recording, you will have the chance to ask questions and participate in the Yoga Scussion yourself. Feel good about being a sustaining member of the show while also joining the Yoga Scussion with us. Thanks for listening, and we look forward to you joining the Yoga Scussion soon. If you've been enjoying the show, please consider leaving us a review on your podcast listening platform or giving us a shout out at yogascussion@podmasana.com. Or you can also reach out on the socials. We are on Blue Sky, Mastodon, Instagram, and YouTube. Sharing a review with others helps a lot. Thanks for listening and leaving a review.